Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Gimba Umar. The existence of Egypt as a nation has not been the same since the revolution that toppled government of longtime dictator Hosni Mubarak in 2011. Following elections, the ouster of Mohamed Morsi, barely a year in office, led to constant protests by the Muslim Brotherhood, military crackdown, insurgent attacks, mass arrests and trials. Mohamed Badi, spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, is among 683 Morsi supporters who were sentenced to death recently after 529 were involved in a similar court trial last month. Charges in both cases are related to violent riots in the city of Minya last August, where a policeman was killed. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on the judiciary in Egypt following the recent developments in that country? You can share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC Africa Today or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv. We'll take this report and Africa Today will be right back. Stay with us.
Families were devastated in Egypt on Monday as a judge in Minya sentenced 683 alleged supporters of the country's ousted Islamist president to death.
There are 3 dead people sentenced to death, people that have nothing to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. This lady's son is already dead, and his name is amongst those sentenced to death.
My brother did not do anything. The officer came and arrested him when he was sleeping in bed and started investigating him. We were sleeping in safety. He is trustworthy, fast, prays, and has manners.
This latest mass trial included the Muslim Brotherhood's supreme guide Mohamed Badi. If his sentence is confirmed, it would make him the most senior Brotherhood figure sentenced to death since one of the group's leaders, Sayed Ku, was executed in 1966. But in a surprise reversal, the same judge also reduced most of the death sentences handed to 529 defendants in a similar case in March, commuting the majority of them to life imprisonment. The judge, Saed Yusuf, said he was referring his ruling on the 683 death sentences to the top Islamic official, the Grand Mufti, a requirement under Egyptian law, but one that is considered a formality.
This is a politicized verdict. This justice system is now siding with one group against the other, and this is unfair.
Both trials are linked to deadly riots that erupted in Minya and elsewhere in Egypt after security forces violently disbanded sit-ins held by Brotherhood supporters in Cairo last August.
Thanks for staying with us. Now, according to reports in Egypt, it took less than 8 minutes for the judge to hand down the verdict condemning more than 680 people to death. This is believed to be the single biggest verdict in the history of Egypt. Joining us to look at the justice system in Egypt is Malake Ugumadu. He's a lawyer and human rights activist. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Good evening.
Also in the course of this program, we will link up with Hugh Miles via Skype. He's an analyst on North Africa and Middle East affairs and also a director of Shafi Miles Consultancy Services. Now, coming back to you, Malake, in your thoughts, what do you make of this mass sentencing?
Well, I think I must start by expressing my resentment as a lawyer. Secondly, the shock that virtually every member of the civilized society has shown. To also say that perhaps this is the biggest, like you said in your intro, that we have ever witnessed. Approximately 700. What is the body of evidence that was collated, or that were collated to come to this conclusion? Punishment such as death sentence is the maximum that you can get in any judicial jurisprudence and jurisdiction. And therefore, if you had taken the pain as expected in every criminal trial leading up to this maximum punishment, it will stand to reason that every details, because in every criminal trial, the standard of proof is beyond every reasonable doubt. If you could do that, and in less than 8 minutes, as you are saying, you have read out your judgment, you have captured all the reasonings that would justify such a verdict, then that will become another Guinness story for the judiciary. So I'm taken aback. I'm also not oblivious of the political exigency of that verdict, and I think that the entire international community should find a way of rising in condemnation of what has happened. What has happened in Egypt should attract serious outcry, not just for the sake of showing resentment, but for the purposes of possible reversal, because it has wide implications.
In this situation, this particular situation in Egypt, where lawsuits are more seen to have graduated towards being a battleground for the law and the government, what does this mean for the Egyptian judiciary?
Well, we cannot take away the fact that most African countries have very challenged judicial systems, in the sense that quite a number of other extraneous factors play important roles in the adjudication processes. But I think that the present experience in Egypt leaves much to be desired. We have seen a situation in which more political considerations were attended to other than legal issues. And I say this because the charges alone are such that, if you like, would have been merely just, categorically called treasons, just so that people will understand that this is where the government was heading. Treasons are usually neither here nor there. They are merely political charges against persons who are perceived to have risen against the state. But please permit me to look at it from the historical background, just so that we could understand and have a better picture of what is playing out.
Sure.
Egypt has never witnessed any democratization process. It has been from the 1952 killing of their king to the successive military interventions until Morsi.
Mohamed Morsi.
Yes, Mohamed Morsi was democratically elected. And so they have no such experience, let alone the consolidation of democratic practices. Soon after the election of Morsi, I think they also made a fundamental mistake and then ambushed the processes that were supposed to be, that were supposed to be allowed to develop and deepen, in the sense that the whole issue of the philosophy of the Muslim Brotherhood overwhelmed what ought to be the deepening of the democratic processes. And how do I mean by that? You began to see quite a number of very sensitive decisions taken by the short period that Morsi was around.
Let me interject there and introduce to us, as I said, we'll be joining also Hugh Miles via Skype. I want to thank you for staying with us, Hugh. He is an African affairs analyst. Welcome to the program once again. What's your general opinion in Egypt following this mass trials and the ruling of 683 Morsi supporters?
Egypt is very divided about this result. I personally think it's outrageous, as I think any right-minded person would do. It's a shocking, absolutely shocking verdict. But the fact is that many people in Egypt oppose the Muslim Brotherhood. They regard them as an existential threat to the country and the nation and the national identity. And they believe that these people deserve to die, and that that no punishment is harsh enough for the Muslim Brotherhood. And there is a minority, a hardcore minority, maybe of 10% of the country or 20% of the country, who are celebrating this verdict and who would like to see more such verdicts handed out.
What possibility is there in this sentencing that people who are innocent could be caught in between?
Well, I think it's absolutely definite that innocent people have been sentenced to death in this verdict. I mean, as I say, it's an outrageous verdict. It makes a complete mockery of the law. And, you know, I don't think it can be justified on any level at all. I mean, the idea that nearly 700 people killed a policeman is a bad joke. You know, clearly this is impossible. It's impossible to understand it. So, I mean, this is a huge travesty and a failure of justice. But you know, this has to be seen in the context of the war on terrorism that has started last year when the military government overthrew the democratically elected president. And since then, the army has unleashed the full force of the state against the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist groups. And that includes the security services, the judiciary, the media. They are all being directed to attack the Muslim Brotherhood and to destroy them. This is clearly the plan, to try and not just subdue them, but exterminate them, eliminate them. And this is a very dangerous strategy, not to mention impossible, because the Muslim Brotherhood are extremely popular in Egypt and won 5 elections in a row, hands down. So this is the recipe for further conflict.
Okay, Miles, I'll just indulge you there to stay on the line for a bit longer and come back to Malaki. Do you see the actions of the government of Egypt as a way to completely stop the Muslim Brotherhood in a bid to advance the cause of the country in Egypt?
Well, I take and accept the first leg of your analogy and then reject the later part. And how do I mean? It is clearly a context between the Muslim Brotherhood, or by extension the people, and the military class. By some political calculation, it became possible for the Muslim Brotherhood that was much more organized to rise to the occasion following the uprising of the people, and then, you know, dealt with the era of Mubarak. And you know, taking advantage of that, they were able, as an organized group, to take the reins of power. Now, but like I said, they also modeled it up when they started projecting their agenda of completely Islamizing the entire state. And for which reason, my colleague on the other side had pointed out the fact that there are quite a handful of Egyptians who are very satisfied with what is going on now. So to that extent, you would say they're trying to exterminate them. But to reason that that is a way to advance, you know, will be very, very far-fetched.
Can we look at the comparative analysis with what has happened in some African countries, talking about Ghana, for example, in the era of one of the presidents whose term was likened to something like this happening in Egypt. What happened in Ghana was a clear cleansing of a political class, and after that, Rawlings was able to put Ghana back on the path of growth. Is this what we're looking at in Egypt?
Well, I fail to see it exactly the same way. I don't think it's exactly the same situation. In Ghana, we were faced, or they were faced with a clear situation in which the political class had modeled up the opportunity they had, and had gone ahead to demonstrate that they were very little interest in advancing the society, other than, you know, primitive accumulation of the collective weight of the state. And it took Mr. Rawlings, who knew that given the depth of the crisis, it was practically going to be impossible to exit that era. And he had to do what he had to do.
Put you on hold there. You're still watching Africa Today at this time. We're going to be taking a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Africa Today. Now, more than 1,000 people opposed to the military-backed regime under Abdel Fattah al-Sisi have been sentenced since December 2013. The mass trials have already drawn widespread criticisms from international human rights groups, with the U.S. threatening to withdraw military aid for Egypt. We still have Mr. Hugh Miles via Skype. He's contributing to these talks. He's an analyst on North Africa and Middle East affairs. Now, let me get straight to you, Mr. Miles. With the state of the justice system in Egypt, how popular and accepted is General Fattah al-Sisi ahead of the upcoming elections there?
Well, it's hard to know, because if you express anything but support for General Sisi, or Field Marshal Sisi, or rather former Field Marshal Sisi, because he's resigned so he can run for the presidency, if you if you criticize him, then you will very likely end up in prison. So it's very hard to know how popular he really is. What's clear is that he was unknown until 2011. And in the last few months, last 6 months, there has been an extraordinary personality cult that has been built up, which, sitting here in Egypt, watching it develop, it has been amazing how this cult has built up in such a short space of time. And he has become very popular amongst many people who fear the Muslim Brotherhood, and who hate Islamism and the idea of Islamism. But how popular is he really? I think that the truth is he became popular fast, and I'm sure he could become unpopular just as fast. The Muslim Brotherhood, I think, have much deeper roots in Egyptian society. And as I said previously, the Muslim Brotherhood won 5 democratic elections. So, you know, they are a force to be reckoned with. So I think that Field Marshal Sisi will win the elections. He will very likely be the new president of Egypt. But I think that, you know, there have been opinion polls. For example, Zogby, a well-known and very respected pollster, did an opinion poll in October 2013. This was at the height of General Sisi's popularity, and he found that the deposed President Mohamed Morsi was as popular among Egyptians as General Sisi in October last year.
So what are you saying? Are we looking at some difference between Mohamed Morsi and Sisi now that you have stated already clearly that there isn't much of a difference? As popular as Mohamed Morsi was on the one hand, so is al-Sisi. Is there any difference why people should see Sisi as the man that they need at this moment?
Well, I mean, the thing is that Sisi has support. He has powerful backers. He is backed by the Gulf Arab countries who fear the Muslim Brotherhood, who regard the Muslim Brotherhood as an existential threat to their own regimes. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait. These wealthy countries are giving Egypt billions of dollars with the express condition that this money comes, and the requirement is that General Sisi cracks down on the Muslim Brotherhood. Because these Gulf Arab countries also have a problem with the Muslim Brotherhood. So Sisi has backers, he has support, and he's also got now the support of Russia. So he has outside supporters helping him, and the Muslim Brotherhood do not have that luxury. They had Qatar, but this was not enough to keep them in power.
Hugh Miles, I want to thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us here on Africa Today. Thank you so much indeed. Now, coming back to you, Malachi, in the studio here. How independent is the judiciary in Africa?
Well, That should be a very rhetorical question. The state of the judiciary in most African countries can be compared with the state of the respective nations in that continent, in the sense that not much could be said in terms of the independence of the judiciary along the line of separation of powers of the state. We have had the trajectory that saw us under military rule in most African countries. In that wise, you are not talking of the independence of the judiciary. You are only going to have an institution that stamps or rubber stamps whatever the executive does. But since the return of democracy in most African countries, there is a very conscious, clear attempt to have an independent judiciary that could rise up to the occasion and dispense justice according to law. But are we there yet? Certainly not. Otherwise, you won't hear...
Is this so much of a difficult process in getting there for Africans?
Well, much as you see it so clearly as a state problem, I will tell you that the quality and content of persons who man the judicial institutions in this continent also calls into question, because for you to have an independent judiciary, you must have very courageous judges and judicial officers who are ready, without any fear or let, to dispense justice according to the law. Not much has been seen in that regard. But are there some persons, some institutions in the continent that are clearly showing to live up to this expectation? Of course, we have seen that. But generally, it is an institution that cannot be insulated from the general state of affairs in the African country. And the way it works, painfully though, is that we have not effectively deepened and we have not matured seriously to the extent where these institutions or arms of government can carry on without interference of the executive in particular.
Surely there must be lessons that can be learned from the Egypt situation that we saw for lawyers and indeed for judges. For the reasons of national interest, that should be, if I might add, what do you see lawyers in Nigeria and by extension other African countries learning from this?
Well, it comes clearly it comes clearly as one situation that should not be allowed to continue. It is one experience that the lawyers, the entire practitioners in the judiciary should be conscious of and remain steadfast in the sense of trying to avoid the reoccurrence in a place like Nigeria. But it also calls for quick action and a concerted action at that, in the sense that if you recall in 1995, when we had the regime of General Sani Abacha, condemning to death the Ogoni Nine, even before there was an appeal on that matter, those people were already executed. You listen to the clips where you saw a woman who, saying that one of the names contained in that list is actually somebody who was gone, and that the other's relation was never involved in. So there are quite a number of innocent people who unfortunately will be involved in this mass massacre, as I see it. So for lawyers here, it is to remain, constantly vigilant, and to say that events such as this should attract unanimous condemnation, not just for the principle of it, but for the justice, the denial of the justice involved in this whole exercise. I mentioned the principle because you cannot, on one hand, be advocating for the enthronement of democratic processes that will enthrone government, and on the other hand, begin to give some measured support for other institutions that has truncated that same process. The Morsi and its military class has simply organized a coup against a democratically elected government. And if we fail to see that very dangerous position, it will mean we are missing the principle and missing the target.
I want to thank you so much indeed, Malaka Gumadu, for joining us on Africa Today, a premium broadcast show here on TVC News. Also thanks to Hugh Miles, who is an African affairs analyst who's been speaking with us via Skype here on the program. Now, the past 1 month in Egypt has seen 37 people sentenced to death, 492 to life imprisonment, with 29 more to spend 5 years in jail, just as the fate of another 683 sentenced to death lies in an appeal on a reverse decision. Many say that this is an evidence of the judiciary's support for government's crackdown on its political opponents in the country. Now, ahead of the elections later in May, Egypt remains a critical crossroad in needs of stability to overcome its economic woes and create an environment where government and opposition can build the nation. And that's our show for today. You can watch episodes of the show on youtube.com/TVC Africa Today. And till come your way again, I am Gimba Umar. And remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.